I want to start with a sort of personal reflection. I've been in Hong Kong, I suppose, for 21 years. And most of my professional career has really been all about what has happened in China, the development in China. From when I came, when I first arrived here, when China was really pretty dormant, frankly, to today, where it is, one of the most active, if not the most active, economies in the world. And over that period of time, we've witnessed a very fundamental change in activity in China. And the way international banks have to engage with activity in China. So for the last 15, 20 years, I suppose, our role was really to raise capital offshore, bank loans, private equity, and of course through the very active Hong Kong Stock Exchange, and introduce that capital into China. That is changing very radically. And today, and my contention in my presentation is that Hong Kong will still play a role, but today the capital flows are reversing, and we are, as you saw in Elaine's presentation, now we're seeing capital flows come out of China and into the rest of the world. And if you look at the initiatives in China, RMB internationalization, the stock connect between Shanghai and Shenzhen and Hong Kong, the whole M&A going out campaign from the SOEs, the establishment of free trade zones in Shanghai to begin with, but now all over China, and of course Belt and Road, it all points to that fundamental change of direction, which is capital coming out of China. Hong Kong has to respond to this, and in my view, it has and it will. And it is in that context that I want to give you 5 observations concerning Belt and Road. The first one is that it resonates with historic appeal. The second is that it is a peaceful initiative. The third is that it is a narrative rather than a specific policy. The fourth is that it is not a closed shop, it is open to everybody. And the fifth and final one, which is the point of our being here, is that Hong Kong has a pivotal and special role. Now let me start with the first point by asking a question. Where in the world, outside of mainland China, is the largest collection of Chinese porcelain? Maybe it's the National Palace Museum in Taipei, or the British Museum, or the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, or perhaps the Louvre, or a big museum in the United States. Well, of course, this is a trick question because the answer is no to each of these. The answer, ladies and gentlemen, is the Topkapi Museum in Istanbul, which has more than 12,000 pieces, Song, Yuan Ming dynasty, all the way up to the Qing dynasty. 600 years of Chinese culture, which coincided with approximately 600 years of the Ottoman Empire, approximately the same period. Now, this porcelain was not stolen, it was not plundered, it was not forcibly removed, it was traded. It was given as gifts to the Ottomans, or it was traded. It was traded in exchange for silks and spices. And it was done so by the silk traders, the Silk Road traders. It was a huge cultural exchange, and it showed the benefits, if you like, of trade in leading to prosperity and wealth creation. And this is my first point, that Belt and Road resonates with this history. It resonates to a time when China was open to the world, when it was trading actively, when it was engaged in foreign affairs and foreign countries, and it was spreading, and prosperity was being spread through private endeavor. And it is also a peaceful initiative. Now, what do I mean by that? Now, I think you've seen 2 or 3 Belt and Road maps in the course of our presentations this morning, and here's another one. This is one I've chosen from CCTV. They all look approximately the same. One of the observations that I've heard is that it looks a bit like a military strategy. It looks like a battle plan, how to maneuver soldiers across these continents. But of course, it is not a military strategy. And the authorities in China, when I engage with them, are very clear in saying that Belt and Road is a righteous endeavor. It is designed to bring peace through prosperity, through trade and commerce. And that's obvious for those of us who are involved in this business. If your neighbors prosper, then you should prosper too, because you open up trade opportunities, you open up investment opportunities, and that is, I think, the idea behind Belt and Road from China's perspective. So the question is, how do we get there? So we have this map, which shows us the route, but what does it mean? Where is the policy? And this is my third point. It isn't a policy. So China in the past, all of us who have engaged in China, we're sort of used to 5-year plans. We're used to objectives being set. We're used to plans being announced and so on. But there isn't really a plan for Belt and Road. It really isn't a policy at all. It is, in my view, a narrative. Indeed, I think to this day, there really is only one official document on Belt and Road, and it's this one. It's entitled, I have to take a deep breath here, Visions and Actions on Jointly Building Silk Road Economic Belt and 21st Century Maritime Road. It doesn't exactly trip off the tongue, at least in the English translation. It was produced by the NDRC, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, MOFCOM, and the State Council together. And when you read this document, it is very heavy on vision, and it's pretty light on action. And that's my point. The Belt and Road is really a story. It's a narrative. It's not a policy full of directives. And it is up to the industry, it is up to the businesses involved in these countries and in this activity to work out their own policy. You see the framework, and you have to decide yourselves how you respond to that framework, how to engage, what the opportunity is. And this is my fourth point, which is that because it isn't really a policy, it is a narrative. It isn't a closed club. It's not a closed shop, as I said earlier. Now, if you go back to, I think, all of the maps that we've seen today on Belt and Road, you will see that most of them, most of the belt and most of the road lines end somewhere in Germany, some of them in Holland, somewhere on the mainland continent of Europe. They don't get to the United Kingdom. This was a huge concern to the British government, that the Belt and Road appeared to stop in Germany. So during Xi Jinping's state visit to the United Kingdom, back in October 2015, he announced to his hosts that the UK was also part of the Belt and Road. I don't know if he was doing it in this picture, but he certainly told his hosts more generally that the United Kingdom should consider itself part of the Belt and Road. And this is my point. It's a very flexible, very open-ended scheme. The number of participants keep growing. You saw today 65 members. I've heard more members, more Belt and Road countries as being part of Belt and Road. The participation list keeps growing. The important thing is that you show willing, that you show enthusiasm and energy and an understanding for the basic principles. But Belt and Road is not a closed shop. It is open to everybody. Okay, so what about Hong Kong? So in my view, Hong Kong will have an absolutely pivotal role in the development of Belt and Road. The clearest manifestation of that for me was a conference, a summit, I think it was called, that was held here in this building on the 18th of May of this year, which was the Belt and Road Summit, organized by the Hong Kong Trade Development Council. It was a huge event. I don't know if any of you were here, but a massive event with, I think, more than 2,000 people, lots of security. And it was opened by His Excellency Zhang Dejiang, who is the third most important man in the hierarchy of important people in China. So to my mind, there was no more powerful statement from China of the role that Hong Kong will have in Belt and Road than to bring this extremely well-regarded, powerful man from China to open the summit. And he made 4 points about Hong Kong, and I agree with all of them. The first one, and you've heard it from Elaine earlier, was the importance and significance and capability in professional services, in particular the legal system. He spoke to finance, which was good for me as a representative of the financial industry. He talked about Hong Kong widening financial channels, and particularly of the role that Hong Kong has in developing offshore international renminbi. He talked about the role that Hong Kong can play in people-to-people exchanges, bringing people together in this wonderful metropolis, staying in some of the buildings, no doubt, that my panelist has helped design and build. And fourthly, he said it was a bridge to China. Now, here I want to come back to my opening statement that Hong Kong has spent the last 15 years bringing capital to China, 15 to 20 years, and that it will spend, I think, most of the rest of its foreseeable future, at least, doing the opposite. Bringing capital from China to the rest of the world. Now, if you look at, and I've taken this as just one example of the way Hong Kong manages capital flows, if you look at the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, it still leads the world in terms of IPO market, 2016 year to date. So it's the number one stock exchange to raise IPO numbers, IPO activity. 40 issues, nearly $17 billion of new capital raised, and a 22.1% market share of the IPO market globally. Pretty impressive. And so far, so good. But if you drill down into the activity that is actually taking place, you find a very interesting story, and you see where that capital is coming from. And if I go back and look at the last 20 years, 20 odd years, and I've just picked out the 11 largest IPOs in Hong Kong, you see a pattern emerging. So up until about 2000, you had issues like China Mobile and others, China Mobile in 1997. They were all raising US dollars, Hong Kong dollars, offshore. Some of them even decided to go to New York with New York Stock Exchange listings. And capital was introduced from offshore and into China. But then in 2010, something interesting happened. First of all, you had two relatively large organizations from outside of Hong Kong raise capital. One of them was AIA, the other one was Glencore. There were two others as well, Samsonite, the suitcase maker, and Prada, the handbag maker, also listed, had a first listing here in Hong Kong. And they did that because they wanted to gain access to the liquidity, the capital that was in the Hong Kong market and in this Hong Kong Stock Exchange. And a lot of that capital was also coming from China. And if you fast forward to today, 2016, the largest IPO in September of this year was the Postal Savings Bank, raised 7.4 billion US dollars of new capital, but 77% of that new capital was pre-placed with cornerstone investors whose source of funds was in China. So the Hong Kong Stock Exchange has moved from bringing capital out from overseas and putting it into China to really tapping the new liquidity that is coming out of China. And the direction of capital flows is definitely changing. We are no longer an into business, we are an out of business. And RMB internationalization is another manifestation of that. And Belt and Road is part of the same phenomenon. So does this pose a problem for Hong Kong? Well, obviously I don't think so. And this is my conclusion in terms of the advantages. Hong Kong is endlessly adaptable and flexible, and it will play to its advantages. It simply needs to change the direction it is looking in, and it has done so and is doing so. So it will continue to do what it always has done, and it will continue to do this community incredibly well. First of all, it really is the world's greatest aggregator and allocator of capital. So we bring capital into Hong Kong and we allocate it out. As I've already explained in the past, we brought it from the US and allocated it into China. I think going forward we will be taking that capital out of China and putting it into, for example, Belt and Road countries. There is also the cluster effect of professional services, and you've heard from the legal profession today, and Zhang Dejiang in his speech at the Hong Kong Trade Development Council Belt and Road Summit also pointed this out. Professional services are a core skill set of Hong Kong. You've also heard about the rule of law and the effective dispute resolution that is available here. Incredibly important for these complex infrastructure financings that sometimes look forward to 20 or 25 years of financial risk. Hong Kong also has an excellence in three fundamentally important currencies: the Hong Kong dollar, which is linked to the US dollar, as we know, and of course increasingly the RMB. These are two currencies that are going to be, I think, dominant. You can discuss which one will be more dominant over the next 20 years, but they will continue to have a dominance in the world economy. And it has a history of connecting China to the rest of the world, and will continue to do that and manage that process extremely well. And finally, of course, it has the benefit of having two official languages, the official language of Chinese and officially the English language as well. So it speaks an international language, and it also speaks the language of one of the most important economies in the world. So these are some of the reasons. They're not the only reasons, but they are the reasons that I've picked for you today, which makes me think that Hong Kong has an incredibly positive future in Belt and Road and in managing the capital flows out of China in the future. And not just a light will be shone out of Hong Kong, but as the title of this summit has said, it will be a beacon across all of the Belt and Road countries. Thank you very much.